Hello, and welcome to the Old Farm Bus Podcast. This is the back of the bus session.
Hello and welcome to the Old Farm Bus Back of the Bus Sessions podcast. Today I've got a mate in with me. She got me into her school. I'm absolutely buzzing about this because we're going to talk about education, why we're passionate about it. Let's welcome aboard Helen Simms.
Hello! Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited to be here. All of the students at the school that you came into have been absolutely buzzing that I've been in here. They've been just like, oh my God, it's so cool. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm the cool teacher for the day.
Yeah. I feel very honoured for you to be here. And thank you for getting me into your school.
Yeah.
It was one of the best experiences at a school I've ever had. And you, I'm really mean this, were a huge part to play in that. Because I've been to great schools, met great teachers, people that are there because they're passionate, they enjoy what they're doing, and bits about the system that can grain them and grate on them, and then they lose a bit of their passion. But you were in the room, electric, energetic, really excited about everything, and really gave your all into the sessions. And that's why the students and myself, yourself, we're all really comfortable and confident in that setting. Is that how you are always in that classroom? You try and bring that energy and vibe.
You have your moments. I suppose I love, the kids and, my friends make fun of me when I say that teaching is literally like why I get up every day. I've never, and I feel so lucky to say this because I know that it's so uncommon in adults when it comes to having a job. Most people find it difficult to even put 2 feet on the floor in the morning. They at the very best, they go there in order to receive a pay packet. And I can honestly say that I've never had a day, no matter how, difficult, that day is going to be going forward. I've never not wanted to go to school. I've never not wanted to go and stand in front of a class of 30. I've never not wanted to go and teach that lesson that day. And even if the subject matter isn't really my thing, what really kind of feeds my soul is being in a classroom in front of 30 faces and watching them grow. And that is honestly, like, I could not imagine myself doing anything other than this job. And I, like, as you saw, that shone through on that workshop day. But that is, teaching is my vocation. It's not my career, certainly.
What a saying.
Yeah.
I honestly felt it because I've been introduced into schools, done an assembly, went in with a teacher. And then again, it's sort of a day for some teachers where they go, oh, I can do all my admin work now. Here I am. When I'm not really a teacher, I just go in and show my passion and go, I love this. What do you love? Let's build. And that teacher, I'm sort of a lot of the time going, I need your help here. I could do with this kid's acting in a way. You must know them really well. You know what they need right now. I'm here for the first time.
Yeah.
I don't know everyone's need in that classroom. Whereas you were really conscious, really aware, helped me sort of bulletproof, well, this one's going to probably need a bit more here, this one's going to need that, and you genuinely cared about every individual there. And that's why the day, it went so well. It was a beautiful happening. I mean, this is where I want to go with this podcast. When I met you, and you inspired me so much, because I'll be honest with you, and we won't go into Mike's story. This is for Helen's day. But I was in a bit of a conundrum in my life, thinking about all the stuff we're doing, the business with the buses, my going into schools. I was just having a bit of a lull and confusion in my life. Many factors. I've got a baby now, the family thing. It was all very up in the air.
Yeah.
You asked me, and Phoebe Gilbert, who is a wonderful human. Big shout out, oi oi.
Of course, yeah.
We'll get into her later.
Of course.
And I just thought, do you know what? I want to give it a go. I'm going to go in. I'm just going to say yes. Why not?
Yeah, I'm so grateful that you did.
And you got me there. Had a brilliant chat. And I just had this spark of, oh my God, this is why I do it. And it was this remembrance where I went, oh, I missed this feeling. So I went into them classrooms with that in mind. Don't forget why you started. Don't forget why you did this, because Martin Illingworth, who you've been taught by, is the reason I first went into schools.
Yeah.
And that was 5 or 6 years ago. And I sort of tried to go, no, dude, you don't want me in your school.
Yeah.
I got asked to leave most of mine.
Yeah, I'm the opposite.
Yeah. You really don't want me. I'll mess it up for you, dude.
Yeah.
But he was quite adamant it would work, and it did. And then when you do something, or when I do something for a while, I can get complacent and I can lose a bit of that psyche and soul of why did you start off? So speaking to you, having that experience and going, oh my God, you've genuinely given me that feeling again of what I wanted to do in the first place. So I really appreciate that. But it was because you were so enthusiastic and lovely about the whole approach, and I felt the authenticity running through you. And I had this feeling of, thank God that you exist and people like this exist and you're in education system. But I would like to go all the way back in the timeline to just find out who you are and how this built up to be and how you feel the way you do about education.
How far back do you want to go?
Can we go really young?
Okay.
What were you like as a kid?
The first thing that I can think of was and I found this about 10 years ago, was my nursery, like nursery, so you're like 2, 3, before school. One of the reports that I was given by my nursery teacher was, Helen is like a very bright little girl, very confident, but she needs to listen to other people's opinions more. And I feel like that really kind of exemplified me at the time, because I had a fantastic upbringing where I had my mum and my dad, but my mum in particular, who told me, and I thought that this was normal for all parents to tell their children this, but that I could be anything that I wanted to be. I could do anything that I wanted to do. And so I've always kind of had this unshakable belief in myself, no matter what kind of life is thrown at me. And school wasn't really like an amazing experience for me. It was in a lot of ways, but it was also very difficult, as I'm sure it is for every student. You always have kind of struggles and troubles as you're growing up. But that kind of self-belief and what she instilled in me meant that I was prepared for whatever life was going to throw at me, and it turned out that it threw quite a lot at me. But I was able to navigate my way through that, and I've never broken as a result of any of the challenges that I faced as a teenager and a young adult.
So would you have had a very close relationship with the family and everything then?
Yes, I did. I had, I was middle class. I didn't want for anything, but my parents didn't raise me in a way that I kind of knew I was middle class. Like I never kind of got everything given to me. I had a work ethic that was instilled in me by both my parents, but my dad in particular. Like I had a very competitive edge. I always wanted to be like the best version of myself, because that was what mattered. Like if I ever coasted, that was something that my dad like would pull me up on. It was always about striving, never wanting to settle, and wanting to be, the best that you could be and to succeed in that way. And although, school wasn't that easy for me, it was certainly a place where I thrived in many ways due to the teachers that I had and the teachers that made me the kind of teacher that I am for children now. Like I feel like almost I'm like a melting pot of so many of the teachers and their personalities wrapped up into one. I can name, about 5 or 6 off, one hand.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's go. Because I've been reading that book, Russell Brand's Mentors, and that's really inspired me, of just taking those best bits and worst bits of people you meet along the way and just finding out who you want to be and who you are through all their mentors in our lives. And teachers, for me, were predominantly not great in my education system, and made me feel quite often that I wasn't good enough. It was always putting a label on. He can't spell, he can't write, he can't do, dyslexic, let's give him that badge. And then, from a very young age, I was always trying to be something more than just what I was. So you had quite a good experience with most of the adults in your life then?
Up until I got to about 15, I had like as most people would characterize, well, I would characterize as a perfect childhood, in terms of I had two parents that cared a lot about me. I was very lucky, and it only, I thought that every person's childhood was like that, really, until I got to be a teacher, I'd say. I knew that, obviously, because before I became a teacher, I was a lawyer for a hot second, and I wanted to become a human rights lawyer. I worked for a charity called Amicus for a time, which provided legal representation for people who were awaiting the death penalty in the US. So that's actually kind of a strange segue into how I got into teaching, actually. But the reason why I became a teacher was because when I was looking at those cases of defendants who were awaiting capital punishment, so many of the character witnesses that were giving them mitigating circumstances were teachers, and were teachers of that child when they were in school.
Oh.
And I literally remember thinking, because law didn't work out for me, it turns out it wasn't for me in the end, but I remember thinking that those teachers were in their lives at the time when they needed them most. And yeah, they couldn't save them, because obviously they're here now with me. But what can I do if I were to be that person in their life back then? Why am I dealing with them after they've committed a double homicide? Why am I with them after they've committed like an armed robbery that went wrong? Why can't I be that kind of model for them back then? And that's why I went into teaching. It's a strange kind of story.
You've lived
I've lived a few past lives.
How old are you?
I'm 27.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is so fascinating. I'm really excited to see this podcast unfold, and I get to have the reins on it. So I'm really excited to be that person. Let's stay as the young Helen then. When you said your dad would sort of help you out and give you a bit of wisdom and bring you up on things, how would we approach that? Would he sort of get down with you on a level and make you reflect on yourself, or would he tell you you're not doing it right?
He came at it from a point of view that was, you are better than this. You are capable of better than this. Coasting isn't going to cut it. It was never like, you must do this because you need to do it. It wasn't like an order. It was telling me that, you are worth so much more than giving the average amount of effort. You will be capable of so much more if you give your best effort all of the time. And that, coupled with, my self-belief, was what drove me to become the person that I am today, which is, I try to remain humble at all times, but I just have this sense of like greatness about myself, because I was always told that I would be, in the sense that I would always go forward and be somebody that made a difference. That was always my driving force. Like I always did the right thing, even though it wasn't necessarily the easiest thing, or made my life easy at the time, particularly in school when you have so many influences on you where you're being, pulled towards the wrong thing because you want to fit in. I never really had that, and it made me, somewhat of a target when in school, because you go against the grain, and when you are a teenager and when you're young, you try so hard to fit in, and I never really absorbed that.
Did you really feel that as a young person? You were thinking, I don't want to fit in here just for fitting in's sake. I want to be myself, and people will join that ride.
It wasn't really a conscious decision. I think it was, I almost kind of like, I knew that I was different in a way. I
owned it.
Yeah, and that wasn't a good thing. Like in terms of like how my school experience was, I was bullied as well. In terms of my schooling experience, but it was because I was different. I went to a very conservative school, in a very conservative area, where girls were expected to be quiet, girls were expected to put on makeup and kind of sit there and laugh at what the boys said. And I was always very vocal. I was always very passionate. I always had a lot of things to say. I was smart. And
Helps.
yeah, but a lot of people, a lot of kids, I will say, didn't like that about me, because I spoke my mind. I've always spoken my mind. I've learned how to better speak my mind in terms of the appropriate moments too, but that's always kind of who I've been as an individual, I'd say.
What was your mum's approach?
She was always very kind, very nurturing. She just, even like my aunts have said this, she was always so hands-on with me. Like if they gave the example that, because I've got cousins that were kind of born within a few months of me, they would be like, the kids would want to play on the slide, and then my aunt would say, come on, because my cousin's called Shannon, she was just like, come on Shannon, like we're bored of playing on the slide now, let's go on the swings or something. And just because she didn't want to be on the slide anymore, it was boring. But my mum would only get bored when I was bored, and she just kind of gave everything that she had. I remember her voice, she's passed away now, but no, it's okay. But I remember her voice, like when I saw like a duck for the first time, it was as if she had seen it at the same time, for the first time. Like the awe and wonder in her voice was what I really remember about my childhood when it came to my mum. So that for me, I'd say, was what I really remember about her. And she just bigs me up all the time, not in a way that made me narcissistic or egotistical. It was just like I remember feeling like I could do anything because she instilled that in me. Interestingly enough, like after she passed away, I had she wasn't a friend in school, she's become one. She was one of the cooler kind of popular girls at the time, and we never really saw eye to eye when we were in school, but we did this kind of like singing workshop together when we were only like 11 or 12, I'd say. And I don't remember having this conversation, but after my mum passed away, this girl, my friend, reached out to me, and she said, I just wanted to say that I've never met your mum, but the thing that I remember about you was you sang up, like you stood up, and you sang a solo at this workshop when we were like 11. And she said that she remembered asking me, like, how do you have the confidence to do that, to like stand in front of like 50 people at 11 and like sing in front of people? And she said, and I don't remember saying this, but she said that I said, my mum told me that I could do anything. And I don't remember having that conversation with her, but that was something that struck her in terms of she didn't have a mum like that. And so I think really since mum passed away, I think I've become more aware of how really lucky I was to have that figure in my life until and just really
I'm
grateful.
Getting in my heart that really the character I was talking about at the start of the podcast that was inspiring me and giving me that reassurance and remembrance of why I started was a very wholesome character, and you had all these attributes and traits, and you attribute that to these parents. Mum and dad were sort of the most important figures in your life. Was that be correct by saying you? And it feels like, do you know that yin and yang? You had this like really compassionate, loving mum, and I'm sure your dad had that too, but he may have had this more assertive dominance in there and give you a bit of structure.
He was certainly the figure out of the two that was about discipline, drive, competition, and I owe a lot to my dad in that way. He was certainly nurturing, and he was very fun as well. Like I had,
you had the whole bang, didn't you?
I had by any objective standard the most perfect childhood, and that really kind of set me up resilience wise in terms of what was to come in terms of life's challenges and losing mum, etc. But I can say that I feel like because of the security of the childhood that I had, it means that I can be the type of teacher that I am to students who might not have who wouldn't have experienced that as I did.
Yeah, what you're saying to me is really good, because it is. I absolutely love it, because for some people, they feel they've got to have lived through the grind, they've got to have lived through the pain to be able to help people. And that's not actually true. The fact that you had these wonderful elements in your life, you can say, this is what it can be. This is what it needs to be. I can fulfill you through what you're not getting. And I've never really thought of that before. That's really beautiful. What you've just said is so important.
Yeah.
And I've not considered it in that way.
I've had two ends of the spectrum, really. But I do think, retrospectively, Mum kind of prepared me for what was to come in a way. It's almost like she kind of weirdly knew.
So and not to say you've never felt pain.
Oh no,
We'll get there. So what figures and adults were in your life to keep that security while sort of there was disrupt there? Was
Dad.
It teachers?
My teachers were great. My head of year in sixth form and in year 11, actually, Mrs. Beardsley, no idea where she is now. But, she was so compassionate, so empathetic. She sat with me for hours. She defended me like a Rottweiler against bullies as well at the time. She was just everything that you could have wanted in a head of year. Like, she had my back. The person that I would say had the biggest influence on me in terms of a teacher and how you should treat a student, like, as even when I was kind of going through the toughest of times when it came to like Mum going in and out of hospital, and like how I felt in terms of like the grief, even though like Mum hadn't died yet, it was certainly like a very slow death in that regard. And so you have like feelings of grief and like rage and depression and just feelings of denial as well. But I remember her like being sat with me after I was in tears, like just everything was getting too much, and she sat with me for about, I'd say, an hour. And knowing what I know now in terms of how busy teachers are, that is a long time to spend with one student. But she sat with me and she shared something personal about herself, in a way that she allowed me to realise that she could empathise with me in that moment of anger and kind of frustration. And she also said, which is kind of, words that I still remember now and have passed on to a couple of students actually who have been in the same situation or like, similar circumstances to me and Mrs. Walton in that moment. She said that we cannot take our personal experience and tragedies out on other people. We can't afford to be angry and hateful at other people who don't understand our experiences. We can't ever afford to be rude or disrespectful to people because it's our responsibility to be a good person. We always have to do the right thing, even though it's not easy. We cannot ever let our experiences become excuses. And that for me was probably the most like profound conversation I've ever had with, at the time, an adult.
Wow.
And she was really I'd say, like, looking back, she was probably the reason why I wanted to be a teacher. I'd say it was always dormant, because of the interactions that I had with her in particular.
But that moment solidified it.
Yeah.
It was.
I think I was always born to be a teacher, I'd say.
Yeah.
I couldn't really think of another career, even though I was so set on law for such a long time. I can't imagine myself doing anything else, and really I don't think I was really destined for anything else,
right?
Due to my life experiences and the teachers that I'd had in my life. Was
there any more help in that situation where times were really confusing and new?
I had a very supportive family. My aunt was amazing. My dad was amazing in terms of what he was trying to navigate.
Did they live together, your mum and dad, through all
Yeah,
this
they were
time?
together. Yeah, my dad was with her, and my dad was still married to her until like she died. So he's got a completely separate experience from me in terms of how he managed to navigate that, and he loved her very much. He was, they were soulmates in every kind of aspect of the word, I'd say. But teachers, hugely. I had my best friend at school. She allowed me to kind of like live with her for a few months as well, whilst I was while Mum was kind of going in and out of hospital. Her mum was really like a huge figure for me. But other than that, I just kind of kids are so resilient. And although all of that was kind of cracking off, I still kept going, especially when I was like in year 11, doing my GCSEs. How I was able to do that, I don't know. Speaking to like my godmother as well about that, she was just like, God knows how you did it, but of course you did, because you were always, kids are always, they are able to compartmentalize more than we realize, I think. And they really value school as an escape in a lot of ways. And I think that was how I viewed it. I was able to come to school and things were normal, and I was able to go to class and learn about, X, Y, Z. And school was complex for me, but it was also a good time. Like I had good time. I had friends.
Yeah.
And I loved academia. I loved succeeding, particularly in English, and particularly, in certain subjects that I thrived in. That was my thing. And I went to a really good school in terms of the extracurricular stuff that they gave us. And like the music things that I was doing, I was always, big into that. And I had a lot of outlets, I'd say. Music was a big thing.
Quite a safety blanket for you, school?
Yes and no, in terms of like the bullying was not nice. But I'd say that certainly made me who I am today.
Yeah.
That treatment from
the bittersweetness of it was important.
Yeah, and it's I hate to say it, but like it was character building. Like,
I think there's an element in there that needs to be addressed. That bullying does sound like a really vicious, horrible element,
and it is.
100%. I came home many times wanting to end it after spending a whole day of just constant names to physical to spitting, and it was disgusting. And it doesn't need to get to that extreme, but there's also, I've got a daughter now, and seeing kids just have a bit of conflict and confrontation, allowing them to work that out together is really important. The big thing for Ella, she got no understanding of personal space, so she just wants to go up and cuddle everybody. And it was lovely yesterday. We took her to, it was like a muddy play in the park. It was beautiful. It's the first time as a family we've really been with loads of other babies around, and some babies were coming up to her and getting into her personal space, and she didn't like it. But I thought, oh, that's really good, actually, because she'll just usually go up to anybody and do that and maybe push them a bit hard or get too excited. And a kid did it to her, and it made her feel a bit of a strange way. And I thought, oh, it's discovery. How did that make me feel? Okay, well, I don't do that to other people then next time. And you start to conduct around that. So same with bullying. It's this factory where you're all together and you're putting bits in the mix and seeing what works. And yeah, the pain is growth, and the mistakes are growth. And then things that we see as this terrible taboo, no, shouldn't do, it's actually to be worked around and to be worked with. And it's all part of the building process, I feel.
And it's so important to allow them to feel pain, and it's so important to allow them to fail, because they need to understand how to regroup after that. It's so important that they learn how to grow resilience from that, because although it's our natural instinct, I don't have children, but in terms of being quite an empathetic and nurturing person, it's our first instinct to protect and to wrap them in cotton wool, so to speak, because you don't like seeing people struggle or be in distress. But actually, if you are able to support them around that so that they can work it out for themselves, they are able to grow as individuals, and they will become a better person for it. Children are the most resilient beings on the planet. The things that they are able to bounce back from are incredible. Like I was we're doing, it's come at the best time really. At the school that I work at is they always do a competition every year, creative writing. It's called Everyone's a Writer. It's very up your street.
I'm in. Yeah, it's sold.
Everyone's a writer. And Key Stage 3 are getting on with it at the minute. And I had the big talk like with my Key Stage 3 classes, and some of the kids that were in those classes attended the workshop, and I was just like, this is your moment to you know, it's not just some people are writers. It's not, you know, this person who's really good at English is a writer. It's everyone's a writer. Everyone can write something and it can be decent. You don't have to spell it right. You don't have to use the correct punctuation. It's your expression. So they're doing it on New Beginnings at the minute, and like the theme is like the phoenix rising from the ashes and things like that. And I've got one kid who I quite, and she was in hospital for a while, and she came back. And, you know, obviously with a few months out of education, she was unable to, you know, have the same start that everybody else had when they came back to school in year 8, because she'd had so much time out. And she wants to write it on that. And she came up to me and she kind of, you know, said that I'm worried that people are going to be like, laugh at me for what I'm going to. I was just like, laugh at you? I was just like, this is your topic. Like, this is what you were made for this particular topic in terms of everyone's a writer. And I was just like, you are the phoenix in terms of the, you know, the things, the everyone a writer's theme. I was just like, you are the thing that is rising from the ashes. You went back to nothing in terms of, you know, you had so much time out. You feel like you can't catch up. You've got to start again, essentially. You're going to be the one that takes this. And in 10 years' time, even though this was horrible to go through, this is going to be the making of you. And you're going to look back at this as like the thing that made you who you are. And, you know, she shed a few tears and she went off, and I felt like that was the conversation. That was the conversation that she's going to remember for a long time. You know, that was the Mrs. Walton conversation.
That was getting me then.
Yeah,
I was like, oh my, you know, God, I wanted a teacher like that at some point.
And I can't wait to see what she writes, actually. But it's just so special to see those moments in students and to have that kind of impact. And you forget, really, you know, as a kid, you remember everything that a teacher says to you. And as a teacher, you hardly remember what you say to a kid, because you say it to so many different kids all the time. And like, you can't remember every conversation that you have. But I think it just goes to show that, you know, everything that you say, they do internalize. She will remember that conversation for a long time. Like, you've planted forever.
A big seed there.
But also, like, just the offhand comments that you make, just like, I'm proud of you. Just like, that was a good thing that you did there.
And genuinely mean it.
Yeah. And, you know, that's not a throwaway comment for me. Like, I say it and I mean it and I want it to make a difference. But that's like an everyday comment that I will make. But to them, that means the world. And that's the responsibility that we have as teachers, to keep providing those moments that they can take and say, do you know what, I will always remember that teacher for what they said to me. My teacher, Mrs. Walton, will probably remember that conversation, but there are many things that she would have said to me that she will like can't remember, but for me they meant the world, because that was somebody that I looked up to and respected. And I will take those kind of memories of those conversations with me for life. And I have done.
So in the timeline, we've gone from a really sort of strong upbringing with all this importance of wisdom and play and love, and that's built up a very strong young person. And then this got to a painful experience, but like we said, we've got some tools to equip with it and build, and then you had awesome figures in your life there. But it was a very painful time.
Defo.
Can you remember, was it sort of because you had this vision of, I'm going to be a teacher? Was that a solace inside of you? Was there a moment within all this where you thought, I've got to do this, I really want to be a teacher, and you had this passion and flame building inside of you? Was that helpful for you to have direction?
I only really wanted to become a teacher after I had a year out of university. I'd just done my graduate diploma of law, so I converted to law. I did.
Had you lost your mum here?
No. So
Okay.
it was the first year that I'd graduated from my master's in law, and then I graduated in like the July, moved home. She died in the November.
Okay.
So it was like the first time that I'd like moved home, and then that's when she passed away. But only I think like 3 weeks before, I went to like a recruitment event for teaching, and I spoke to like an amazing, she became quite like a close friend actually, a mentor, the mentor at the teaching school that I trained at. And she spoke to me, and she I remember her emailing me after I gave her my contact details to go and work at that, or to train at that teaching school. She was just like, I was blown away by like your commitment to it, and I think you'll be a great candidate for interview for training. And then 3 weeks later I lost my mum, because I was supposed to have like the interview like a few days after mum died. And then they tried to rearrange the interview, but like throughout she was just so communicative, and she spent the time to send those like really supportive emails to me and made me feel like I was on her mind a lot. That's why I decided to go with that particular teaching school. But then I had my interview literally 30 days after mum died for teacher training, and I remember being in that interview and I had to do like a 15-minute lesson. Like I had no idea what I was doing. Like I it was embarrassing in terms of like how I can teach now, like what you actually need to do in a lesson. But I just remember that day, it was like I wasn't like possessed by like the Holy Spirit or anything, but like I had there was a feeling that like mum was there in some capacity. Like I just felt so serene. I felt so like I'm ready to do this. And I remember being in the interview, because there was like a 40-minute interview afterwards where the mentor was speaking to me, and she, you were expected to kind of go home. You'll get a phone call later as to whether they're going to take you on to train you as a teacher. And before I'd gone home, she like pulled me into a room and she said, "You were born for this. You're going to be putting me out of a job." She was just like, I've never seen somebody who is so cut out for this line of work 30 days after, the passing of your mum, for you to pull that out I've never seen anything like that. She was just like, of course, teaching is about being reflective and doing things better, and you're always going to make mistakes. But she was just like, you are the finished product in terms of what is needed when in a teacher. And I feel like on that day, I was just like, this is it. Like, and I've never had any kind of day like this and day like that in terms of feeling like all of the building blocks have fallen into place at once. That was the day.
Wow.
Yeah.
You've got me a little bit.
Yeah.
Might need to press pause a minute. Yeah, regroup.
Yeah.
Come on, zen in, Mikey. You've got me there.
Yeah.
That is absolutely stunning.
Thank
and the
you.
way you told that. Can we go into some of them assets that you feel she saw in you then? What is that? What did she feel from you?
I think like the passion, like I said all of the right things because you have to in an interview. But it was clear, and people have always said this about me in terms of, you care a lot. You're very, if we were going to, cast X, Y, and Z for personal qualities and for, drive, passion, commitment, determination, belief, vision, it's you. Because I've never felt like there's anything other than it being a vocation for me. I just feel like it's just what I was like designed for, I guess. Molded for.
What is being a teacher then, and what have you seen
on the day-to-day or just generally?
Being a teacher, on the day-to-day, because I never wanted to go into schools at all. I had such a terrible time there.
It's a bit like a trauma kind of.
Yeah, it was like PTSD going back for the first time. I remember everything come flooding back. It was the bullying, the being made to feel this big, tiny little Mikey again. And I got on that stage shaking, sweating, panicking, and it was in a pupil referral unit. And the first kid that I saw, and I still speak to him to this day, to be honest, Kanan, he told me to fuck off. That was the first thing he said. Yeah. And I was like, oh, really? But that put a fire in my belly. And I was going, no, I'm not.
Been told that many times before.
I'm not ready for this. So I thought, I'm going to go head on, performed a poem, and I'll swear again for any triggers there. Beep. But I finished, and he went, well, that's not poetry. That's fucking sick.
Oh, nice.
And then we became mates, and suddenly he started performing, and that was my moment of, actually, there's something in this. And it was honestly from that moment, when I was going in for the year or 2 years, I ran off of that first anecdotal moment.
Yeah.
And I was reaching for them a lot of the time. Life got in the way a little bit, and I was sort of lost the enthusiasm, because a thing for me is I like developing, and I found out this perfect first initial meeting, but I got a bit dry to it.
Right.
Then going back into your classroom, it felt fresh again.
We revived you.
You got me there. But along the way, and get back to that question I was saying, what it is as a teacher, I've become more passionate about the system and how it's deployed and how it sort of looks. My partner's a teacher.
Yeah.
And how it makes people feel. And I do genuinely think a lot of the time people go in with the right idea and philosophy, and I want to teach my passion, and I just love young people, and I want to help them. And then suddenly it grinds them to this halt where they go, this isn't what I thought it was.
Yeah.
So what is it to be a teacher, and how do you conduct yourself within that sort of beast and system?
I suppose, like the day-to-day, in terms of, is that what you're looking for? In terms of what like a day looks like in the life of a teacher? A lot of it is keeping to timings, knowing that you've got 5 lessons a day and you've got 50 minutes that you can teach something in. Knowing that even if you've prepared the best that you can, and you know absolutely everything that you know you're going to teach that day, something will throw a curveball at you. It's about, you know, adapting. A kid's had a fight earlier that day. They don't want to sit next to this person, and so you've got to like figure out that. You've got to like log in. Like one of my friends had a bit of a research into how many decisions do teachers make a day, and it's like 10,000 in a working day. It's because like if you factor everything in, and people don't believe me when I say that, but when like you have to remember your password, log in, right? So this person's come in and they've banged the door, you have to go say, well actually Charlie, can you go back and close that door properly? Why are you two shouting over there? Right, so I need to log in. Oh, my password's wrong. Oh, I've forgotten it. Is it like put like .1 or 1? Is the board working? No, it's on freeze. It's all of that is kind of chaotic.
Freestyle rap.
It feels like that. And then, you know, you've like somebody's like not sat in the right place. Why are you sat there? Go and sit over there. Just like, why isn't your book open? Date and title on the board. Right, do now. You need to make sure that you've got like, so how many quotes can you remember from last lesson? And then you've got to go into the lesson. Somebody might get brought back in from on call and you weren't expecting them to be there. Somebody might just be brought into your class because they were acting out somewhere else and they're from a completely different year group, and you've got to give them something to do. So I think just in terms of like the day-to-day, particularly in my subject in English, like it can be you just have to be able to adapt, and you have to be so flexible, and you have to have a positive attitude, because otherwise like the kind of minutiae and the grinds can wear you down, and you just can't, you know, forget why you're there in the first place. And I hope that I never do. I hope that I never forget that.
Did you went to Sheffield Hallam, is that correct?
So I went to University of Sheffield for the first 4 years. So I studied English literature and philosophy, then I did a master's in law, and then I trained at Sheffield Hallam where I met Martin.
Right.
Yeah.
And was he quite an important figure in
Definitely.
your life?
He was actually, ironically or kind of strangely so, he is friends with one of my RS teachers that taught me, and they're kind of like almost like twin souls, I'd say. Like they're quite similar. Mr. James was just a G.
I need to meet this guy.
Mr. James,
straight away.
Just what a guy! Just the most charismatic teacher that you could ever come across. He, you know, a lot of people might say that RS is, you know, full of like religion. It's a bit boring. Like he just made it so fun, so interesting. And
what would he do?
Just the way that, like,
Guitar?
I remember. No, it wasn't anything like that. It was
under the tree.
I remember. He used to get his stuff to like copy out, and now as a teacher I'm just like, he wanted this to be copied out so that if like Ofsted came in, like it looked like we'd done something. And but he'd do kind of like silly things just to like to see if we were listening, and he was just like, Jesus was, you know, part of the 12 disciples, and Jesus thought that you should always look after your body, full stop. And so we were copying this down, and he was just like, but Jesus in fact himself was a smoker. And so we were just like, Jesus was a smoker. And then somebody was just like, wait, cigarettes weren't invented then, like into like 2000, like, you know, or like BC, whatever. And he was just like right, so you're listening. That's not a great example, because he was
Perfect.
just so much, he was so funny, like he was so just like the anecdotes about his life. He made us feel that we could relate to him. He was just somebody that you always felt like you could relax around. He was great.
This is what I'm feeling a teacher is.
That's what a teacher should be.
These traits, these really beautiful, wholesome characteristics you're talking about here, for somebody in the bureaucracy of this is what a teacher is, what do you think they're looking for?
I think it's changing now, and I think it's quite encouraging how it's changing now, because I think there has been less focus on getting children through, you know, like the examination machine. I think going forward, it's going to be more about how are we meeting the needs of the children, particularly in the aftermath of the pandemic. There is more, which is so encouraging, of an emphasis on trauma-informed teaching. We've had so much CPD about that.
Is that just in your school, or have you having lots of conversations with different teachers?
Nationwide.
Really?
Particularly now from teachers that I've spoken to and heads that I've spoken to at different schools in Sheffield. But we've certainly had more, you know, career like development seminars and trainings on trauma-informed practice, because we have no choice now. And in the aftermath of the pandemic and the amount of trauma that students have experienced, and the spectrum of what that looks like, we don't have a choice not to learn about that now and to act accordingly. Because, you know, what happens if we don't? It's just going to be catastrophic.
I'm guessing for you as well, from experiencing such trauma, it really settles in your heart of seeing this happening and this being implemented. It's filling you with a lot of positive feelings towards it. And I think mostly, even when I conduct this podcast and I'm speaking to rappers and hula hoopers or whoever, when we get into education, it's always of a very negative nature, because most people that I speak to and got passions and living their lives now, and this is what Martin's book Forget School's all about, they learn all the important things afterwards. And that's sort of or a lot of my friends and people I've met, it's their perspective is this old school authoritarian shite show. And then they've lived on, and that's a common theme and a common concept towards schools. But to hear somebody who's actually in the system and seeing what's happening now, it's really encouraging to hear such a fresh perspective and saying, actually, there's this and there's this and there's this, and it fills my heart with a lot of positivity. So what else are schools doing to freshen up and get away from that outdated, come here, retain information, put it out there, regurgitate it, and the ones that are really good at retaining it will go on and do well, and the ones that don't know how to do that, sorry guys, but you can go and find your own way.
I think for all of, you know, COVID's traumas and, you know, the devastation that it's caused, I think that we are going to be moving in the right direction now, only because we're going to have no choice not to. We are going to have to address the impact that it's had, not only on, you know, their loss of education in terms of academia, but also their loss of socialization, because they've been in isolation. You know, I was talking about this with my year sevens, and we were talking about how, you know, a couple of days ago, we no longer had to legally isolate due to, if you tested positive from COVID. And they were like, what? Like, what on earth? And I was just like, you have experienced this pandemic for 1/6 of your lives. 2 years is a long time for anybody, but for an 11-year-old, 2 years is a very, very long time. And they can't remember what was life like before then. And so I think it's really, we need to start addressing how we can meet their needs in the world after they have been locked down for so long. We are, as a school and as a nation, because all teachers are passionate about doing this and they've recognised the issues here, is that we need to start introducing them to life's opportunities that they were refused as a part of COVID isolation and lockdown. Your workshop was the first experience, I'm going to say, that those students have ever kind of come into contact with somebody like you, or had an afternoon like that with somebody like you. And I feel like in a lot of ways we're making up for lost time in that regard. Just the nice things, like just being able to like sit in a hall, like assemblies have been online, like they've had to do it in their forms. They're not allowed to mix as a year group, just in like, being an audience. That's something that they can't remember ever doing because they weren't allowed to. And playing together, singing was banned, that sort of thing. And I just feel like we need to flood them with those opportunities, and we need to flood them with, that message of you can and you will if you put your mind to it. I was only having a conversation with a member of staff, after you came in, and she was just like, it's so important that we keep getting in, the likes of you and others who can inspire them in that way, because if we keep repeating that message to them and keep drowning them in opportunities and possibilities, that is the only way that we can come out of this better than before, like the phoenix from the ashes.
Oh mate, it always comes back round to that blooming phoenix.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
With that, and during the COVID, were you doing a lot of online stuff?
Yes.
What was it like?
Everything.
Work?
Yes, very. It was everything about teaching that you knew was just like stripped away. I'd say. You didn't even have, like, I think in America they had like their screens on, like their cameras on, so you could see them like behind the screen. We didn't have that, and so we only had like icons with their name on it. And so we didn't know if some of them were there. Like, we didn't know like if they were listening. You can't see their body language. You can't see them. And they had their microphones muted until you asked them a question. Some of their microphones, loads of their microphones didn't work. And so
coincidentally.
And then when they turned them on, sometimes they had stuff in the background.
Oh no.
But just the amount of times that you were just, calling into the abyss of like, is anybody there? And then you don't get anything back. That was really difficult. It was what I love about teaching is being in front of a student and having those, interactions and talking to them, seeing if they're upset, if they've got their head on the desk.
Genuine connection.
Yeah, like actual human connection.
Yeah.
And that was stripped over that time.
Because I'd seen articles and writings about AI taking over roles of the teacher.
No.
What's your theory and thought on that? What separates you from this device that's got some knowledge of humanity within it, and for the child to explore and be taught by this AI, or for somebody, as you just said lovely there, with a human connection?
AI can never recreate or can never embody true human connection. They can sense it through an algorithm, but they can't react accordingly. They can't act in a way that a human can because they're not programmed to do so.
It's too perfect, isn't it? The clumsiness, the not knowing what to say, the clunkiness is the beauty of being human.
Teaching is more than imparting knowledge. It's, that's 20% of it, I'd say. It's about how to have a difficult conversation. It's, you know, if they don't understand something, well, you need to put the building blocks in place so that they can get to the right answer. And that is part of, you know, the way that the style of questioning that we do at school and what's encouraged at my particular school is if they don't know the answer, they can't opt out. They can't say, I don't know. You've got to be able to scaffold their knowledge. You've got to be able to use somebody else in the classroom to say, well, can you help them out? Can you give them a clue? Can you explain, you know, what is a simile? I don't know. Okay, well, somebody else in the class, give me an example of a simile. He was, you know, dancing like a tree. I don't know. Not very good example from an English teacher off the top of my head.
Beautiful for me.
Dancing like a tree.
Write that down.
I'm just like, okay, so why is that a simile? I don't know. Okay, well, how is it different from a metaphor? Give me a metaphor. The sun was an oven. What is the difference between that metaphor and the simile? The sun was an oven. He danced like a tree. A metaphor is when something is literally the case. What is that simile doing? Well, he uses like. So it's not a direct comparison. No. So therefore, it is like something. It's a comparative. It's not saying that something literally is the case. And then that's when that kid gets the answer. And
I love you.
I love you too.
Like, this is great.
But that's, you know, that it's about not giving them the answer, not kind of, you know, rounding up their answer. They've got to get there themselves. And it's about creating that resilience as well. You know, the worst thing that I can do is say no. Like, the worst thing that I can do is say, right, somebody else help him out. And it's creating that. A lot of kids, particularly because of the pandemic, are scared to give a wrong answer because they haven't had to speak in front of anybody for a while. They've just had to kind of like sit behind a computer screen and just like be fed information. And a lot of them suffer from social anxiety as a result because they are worried that people are going to laugh at them.
Judge them,
yeah. And so I had a conversation with my my Key Stage 4 class the other day about giving answers, and I was just like, why does nobody want to read their answers out? Like, why does nobody want to read like their answer to question 3 out? And they were just like, and I was like, why? And they were just like, because it's embarrassing. And I was like, why are you embarrassed? And they just said, and I was just like, would you find somebody embarrassing if they read their question 3 out? And they were like, no. And I said, well, why would anybody find you embarrassing? Would you laugh at somebody who gave an answer? No. Would you laugh at somebody who gave a bad answer? No. So why do you feel like people would do that to you? We were talking about how, like, you know, social anxiety is quite narcissistic in a way because you always think that everybody's thinking about you when actually they're really thinking about themselves.
Yeah. That you build up of other people. They're always thinking about me.
Yeah. And I think it's about, you know, something that I'm really focused on is building that culture of resilience and, like, you know, it's okay to get something wrong. And a classroom should be a community of peers and support. And, you know, we want to make each other better. That's why we share ideas, because when we share ideas, we can, you know, magpie and take things from other people, and we can learn something. We can add that to our answer because they said that, and, you know, vice versa. We can learn in that way. And I think during COVID, that was something that we missed hugely, and something that we're going to have to spend a while getting that back, but we'll get there.
And that vulnerability, you know, miss, what's this word?
Yeah.
12 syllables in it and so on. And, you know, I don't know. Oh, God, what, that authoritative figure that's, if AI was there, it'd tell you exactly every time it's this, it's this, it's that. For you to be open and honest and vulnerable and I don't know, what a beautiful set of rules and a set of sort of words to say for them to grow from. I'm not perfect, you know. We're all human in this room together. We can all grow. I think it's so important. And again, I just keep looking over and reflecting at how happy I am that people like you exist and you're in the environments that you're in, because we're doing these off the breaks things here now, and I've seen how complex being a teacher is, and how much energy and time and consumption it can do into your life. So genuinely, I don't know how you do it. I get to go in, show my little thing, go out, try other things, but to be there every day, just showing up, being vulnerable, having to have this amount of information and more, and you're going to be thrown curveballs, like you say, at every opportunity. I can see why it can break down people as well, completely. So for those people that eventually may get broken down by it, have you got advice for those teachers?
You can't take things personally. It's never personal, particularly with children. None of their behaviour is personal towards you, even though you think that it is. Even if they're swearing at you, it's not because of you.
Sort of a very underlying thing. It's a reflection on them, isn't it, and what they're going through. And it's like a scream for, please listen to me, please love me, help me. But they'll put that out in a completely different set of ways.
And the best thing that you can do with something, with a kid like that, is to just not react. It's like it's a neutral thing, and also to give them a fresh start afterwards. It's so important that they know that despite they've done that awful thing, and it's obviously going to cause emotional distress in anybody who's sworn at, particularly when they're at work. You have to give them that second chance. They need to learn that they can trust you, that you forgive them. That's a huge thing. And that you still care about them regardless. I think the best thing that you can say to a kid is, like if they do something like that, is I still like you, I still care about you, and there's nothing that you can do that can change that. And I feel like that security in students is so important when it comes to dealing with the hardest to reach. But people who have, had like the teacher fatigue and like they've been worn down by the system, there's always a difference that you can make, whether that be one child, whether that is with a class, whether that is within a school. There's always something that you can do. And be introspective. Yes, you've missed out on something at work, or yes, you've not had a particularly amazing experience with a class or with a student, but there's still a reason to keep going in. And remember the reason why you became a teacher in the first place. And for me, that's because, I wanted to make a difference, and I love working with young people. I think that, their energy is amazing. That's what always kind of reminds me, if I've had, a bad, week or a bad day, I know that I'm still doing what I love to do, and that's teaching my subject, but also working with those like amazing energies and seeing what they can bring to the table. And it's great to watch.
Thinking of the pivotal figures in the story, in the timeline we've spoken about, Martin being a really important one in mine, and then one in yours, can you reflect on a few things that he gave you and tools going into teaching?
He was just really kind to me. Like, it was the 1 year anniversary after Mum passed away, and I was like, I don't know kind of whether I want to go into uni that day or whether I just need like the day. I didn't know kind of like how I was going to feel, I suppose. And he took the time to send me an email to say that he had also, lost his mum at exactly the same age. And he was just like, although like I don't know how you're feeling, because they're your experiences and they're your emotions. He was just like, I can relate a little bit. And he was just like, whatever you need on that day, I'll be able to, provide that for you.
Just to jump in there, that's stunning, because I was going to mention something that we said earlier in the podcast about the teacher for you that gave a bit of an example of something she was going through and said, I can be empathic here. I did want to ask you, how do you do that and not take the story away from them? Because a lot of people go, oh, I went through this, and then they go and reel off, so then I felt this, and
and make it about you,
and it's all about them then. You've just said you had a teacher there and Martin that did a really beautiful thing. How do you go about that situation, not turn it to you?
In general, or with students?
In general,
it's always, you need to listen to them. You need to ask them questions about them, and if you do relate on a certain note, I think it's okay to share that, but not in that moment share your feelings and your experiences. Only just mention that you have had a similar experiences enough, because then if they're ready and if they want to, they could ask you about it. But I think it's then not your place to then go off on just like, and I felt like this and this is what happened to me, and I can relate to you in that way because this, and that's their moment that they're sharing with you.
Right. I do little snippets of this podcast, and that's definitely happening to be a snippet of the podcast.
No.
It's really cool. So, because I interjected then, keep on the Martin train.
Yeah, Martin. Yeah. Okay, back to Martin.
I just needed to hear that little bit of wisdom, and back into sort of other ways that he reaffirmed, this is what a teacher is, this is what we need to give.
I think a question that I asked, I remember being in a lecture, and I said that when I was training at the time, there was a kid that was just like, I think they said, there was the mentality with that particular child that was just like, you work for me, as in like, you're supposed to do what's best for me, in terms of, there was an entitlement there with that particular student when I was working at my training school. And I spoke to him about it, and I was just like, what do you do with that attitude? Because yes, the taxpayer, pays my salary, but in terms of like, I'm there and I'm trying to help you, that's certainly not like the view that you really want to work with. It kind of puts your back up at the time. And then he was just like, you do work for them, in terms of that is what you are employed to do, and that's what you should want to do. Yes, the attitude is something that you can address, but at the end of the day, this is the most selfless profession that you can put yourself in. It's not about you. It's about what you can bring for that certain child. And yes, you can speak to them about, respect and, how you express that certain attitude in terms of, you work for me sort of thing. That's not the best thing to say. It's not the attitude to have. But at the end of the day, you've got to find a way in order to meet that child's need. That's your responsibility. That's your duty. And as teachers, that is what we can't forget. Like, we can't get egotistical. We can't afford to think that, we are the people that are in a job of service. We're in public service. And it's very different from people who work in the private sector. We are people who have dedicated our lives to providing that service to the most vulnerable people in our society, which is children. And so we can't neglect or forget that responsibility and that duty.
So maybe in that situation, sort of him acting brash and saying, you work for me, as somebody would to the police or something, a level of authority.
My dad pays your salary.
You could have said, I do. What do you need from me? How can I help you? I'm working for you right now. I want to give you a service. What do you want? Do you think that would have baffled them? Because I'm guessing a lot of the time, you are right. Teachers are on this sort of very 7, 8, 9 on the scale of ready to go off, and they see it as a tax on them when a kid's being in a certain way. You've said something beautiful in this podcast. It's never on you. It's what's going on through them, and they're just channeling that out. But a lot of teachers are ready to just go, the next one that says this thing, it's all been about me. Bam, bam, bam. But do you have that moment now, because you've been in teaching a while, of reflectiveness and going back in and how can I approach this situation?
The best teachers are reflective. To know that you've made a mistake and then go and repair it. You're not always going to say the right thing all the time. You're not always going to teach the right thing all the time. There's, of course you've got to be consistent. Of course you've got to know what you're teaching. But there are moments, because we are human, we do make mistakes, or we do, raise our voice when we shouldn't, or whatever. And I think it's important that we show children that we can own up to our mistakes as well, and we can say sorry. And, the best teachers that I've ever seen have been the ones that have gone to see that child, sat down with them and just say, David, I'm sorry I shouted. It was because I was frustrated. It was because I, the behaviour that you were exhibiting at the time, I was just really frustrated with you and I lost my temper and I wanted to say that I'm sorry. And the kid is just like, it's okay. And they do accept it, and I feel like they do appreciate the humility of an apology from a teacher. I think they
vulnerability again.
and just kind of owning up that you you messed up, and that's okay. And but the point is that you learn from it and you don't do it again.
I love them words, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's that beautiful forgiveness for anything you've been through. I did this, and that's okay. And not to just get complacent with it, just every time keep smashing windows, and that's okay.
No.
Smash a window, and
It's
that's
not about
okay.
that. Yeah.
But it's that constant reflectiveness as well, but not beating yourself up too much.
Yeah, definitely.
The nuance and the balance.
The
That's
development, character development.
what life comes down to all the time. You get around a campfire with your mates and you have these really, really deep, intense chats, and then you go, it's all just balance, isn't it, basically?
Yeah.
It's all this balance.
It is.
Because I'm really enjoying this, and some of the anecdotes that you've said have been so beautiful, profound, and give me them shiver moments. Do you have any more? It can be from primary to secondary to uni, of people that you've encountered that did confirm you're in the right space and this is what you want to do.
I just think that, the mentors that have kind of pulled me through into the profession that I'm in, really. Just the students that I've come into contact with, and knowing that, what impact that you've personally left upon them has been, I would say it's once in a lifetime, but I'm fortunate enough to say that I get those moments all the time. When students leave, like the letters that they write you to say, what kind of impact you've left upon them, and like the conversations that you've had with them will last them a lifetime. Like, you are the reason why, I was excited to come to school. You're the reason why I enjoyed English lessons. Like, you're, my favourite teacher because you did this, or you taught this, or you were like this. Is, the reason why you do it. Really, not in an egotistical way, but it's just, it reminds you that even though, certain years or certain days or certain aspects of the job are so difficult, and you forget that that you are making a difference, you actually are.
And then this feeling of ego, we've sort of put a very negative light around it, but I was saying to you before the podcast, I've done this sort of self-development course, and we touched on ego, and a lot of the time we're unconscious around doing certain things to fulfill our ego's need, and it's to look a certain way and manipulate a situation, and but also the ego is just a character, and sometimes it's good, it puts you in them positions, it puts you in front of places. If I had absolutely no ego at all, I wouldn't want to achieve very much in my life. But having beautiful moments given to me, coming into that school and remembering those lovely things said and those lovely moments, that feeling, because what I attribute ego as is this feeling of special. I feel different, I feel special. That's what is part of my character. It's really nice. I think we don't have to just pan ego out to be this evil character. The feeling of being special, having an ego, but channel it in a healthy way and putting it in a good aspect of your nature, doesn't have to be shone out. Does that make sense?
It's about being proud of yourself as well. You're proud that you got that card. Like, you're proud that that kid said, this meant something to me. It's about, I did a good thing here, and it's realizing that about yourself and being just like, I made a difference here.
I'm good at this.
Yeah, and
that's what I feel. As soon as I start talking with myself in that way, all I do is batter myself down, because I'm like, no, your ego. But it's, being real with it, being healthy with it, and saying, no, my character enjoys this so much that it's become very good at it, and it belongs here.
I think so. I think it's always good to be humble, in particular in teaching. You're humbled all of the time, in terms of the mistakes that you make, or you feel like, certainly, like, imposter syndrome is so common in teachers.
I can imagine.
And thinking that you don't know what you're doing. But I think it's so important to take those moments as they are, in terms of, do you know what, like, that letter that they wrote me, I'm going to keep that, because that will remind me in moments where I've forgotten that, I'm really good at this, and this is what I'm meant for, and, to hold on to those as well and treat them as they should be.
Any other anecdotes of teachers, the drama teacher, the science teacher, the English teacher, that had your back and made you feel really special? How did they do that?
I was just really blessed at my school. I feel like I've when I was at school,
Where did
like
you
I
go?
had to. I went to Ecclesbourne School.
You.
I know that you were going to
so
say.
envious here.
Yeah, I went to Ecclesbourne School in Duffield. Really kind of middle class school, very conservative. But the teachers that were there were, the vast majority, and particularly the ones that I was, closest to in terms of the subjects that I chose. They were all just so different, but all just amazing in their own ways. Like, we had Mr. James for RS, I've already spoken about him, Mrs. Walton, who was my head of year, my year 11 head of year, Mrs. Beardsley, she was amazing. But like the teachers who they saw you as an individual and they taught to you like an adult, but also like the ones that went the extra mile, like Mrs. Knight. I don't know if she's even alive anymore. She retired, but she was so old. But she was this most terrifying woman, like so strict. You sat boy girl. You didn't talk in her class, otherwise she'd like bark at you. But she came to my music concert, like because I used to sing for a jazz orchestra when I was 16. And I fronted that, and she came to like a concert because I told her about it, and she came and she was on her own and she sat with a book, and she didn't look up from the book until I was on stage. And she used to come to like quite a few events like that, because I used to sing at like the Quad in Derby and like do like singer-songwriter. Do you remember the Quad?
Of course,
yeah, like the Quad.
Still
yeah,
going,
yeah,
still
is it?
yeah.
Like I used to sing at the Quad in Derby. And she came to all of those things, and she was like, it was so like not her scene, but the fact that she took like time out of her evening to come and watch me just meant the world to me. And she wasn't approachable in any way, but because like unlike some of the teachers and unlike I am as a teacher, but she was just so like, I adored her. Like I worshipped her. I thought that she was so smart. Like she was just a boss. But the fact that she did that for me, I don't know, it made me feel like special, I suppose, like when I was young.
At Ecclesbourne, would the teachers, and this is just on a very simple level, but I do have a question within this, are they paid more money to be there, in essence?
Not as far as I know.
Okay.
Because their pay isn't dictated by the Ofsted rating. All teachers, as far as I'm aware, have a salary depending on how many years that they've taught, and if they've met their targets that year, they get moved up. Unless it's within a range, but you can't give teachers more money depending on how the school goes, as far as I'm aware. Yeah,
I was just reflective of that. Yeah, that when
they had
you
a
said
completely different demographic,
Right.
if that's what you're getting at, in terms of the challenges that they would have faced as teachers at that particular school.
I suppose it's lighter. I was just working out loads of thoughts, because I don't think I had a very good school. That's just a genuine belief, and it isn't in a middle or upper class area like Ripley's supposed to be quite working class. So I think I'm getting to a bit of an understanding through my own workings out in my brain right now. But I was first of all going to say, are they on more money? Because for me, I'm passionate about filmmaking, for example, as well. I do music videos for people and stuff like that, and I love it. But I've done loads of free stuff.
Yeah.
And even when I've gone to a job now, money is a really important factor in my life. I've got a daughter now.
Yeah,
I've got
you
a
need to
family.
provide, yeah.
I really want to provide. So the feeling I get if I'm doing something that I know my people pleasers come through, I've said, yeah, I'll do it. I'm standing there and I don't really want to be there, because I'm thinking, this is not warranted 50 quid. This is a £300, £400 project.
Yeah.
And I'm going to spend all my nights working through it. So even though I love filmmaking, I've not valued myself properly. So then you get to that mindset of, I don't really feel good enough in this. I love what I'm doing, but the money's not rewarding enough. So it can put me off.
Yeah.
Already. And I wondered if some teachers have that. They love what they do, but then they see how much hard work's involved, and then they weighing up the money aspect of it, and they're thinking, I'm not getting paid enough for this. That famous saying, I'm not paid enough for this.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if the teachers at Ecclesbourne had this, I call it FU money. You know what I'm saying? Where they feel, oh, do you know what? I'm being paid my worth. I'm going to really put it in. And then for some other teachers in working class areas or so on, may feel, I'm really not getting paid enough for this. I didn't know what it was going to be.
No, I think it was because they just had completely different experiences to, teachers at other schools. They had a very specific demographic. It was middle class. They had, parents who provided tutors for the students, like it was an outstanding school. And so they just didn't have the same pressures as other schools do. And they were able to kind of be more human in that respect, I suppose.
That's a really good answer. Yeah, I get it.
When you
Makes more
have,
sense
yeah,
now.
I've worked in a few schools before I became qualified, but I've only worked at the current school that I'm at since being qualified. And so I can only kind of speak from experience, but other schools who might have different demographics to that of Ecclesbourne might have completely different experiences due to, the students that are getting, that they're getting through, the rating of the school by Ofsted causes a lot of hoops that they need to jump through in order to get it out of special measures or requires improvement, and there are a lot of goals and targets that those teachers are given which can grind them down, but I think that at the end of the day, as I always kind of maintain, that you have to remember why you're doing this, and regardless of what Ofsted has graded that school as being, you still have to make a difference. Like, you still have to do your job every day, and you have to be outstanding, because those students deserve for you to be outstanding, to give them an outstanding education. And that is something that you can do on an individual level, and the Ofsted results will follow, I'm sure.
What you've just said then makes perfect sense, because if you set this curriculum and across the board, this is how we need to teach, and do the same for Ecclesbourne as what you do for the school that I went to, it makes absolutely no sense. Because when you're a teacher going into Ecclesbourne and they've already got all their emotional needs met, the family,
on the whole,
often, a lot of the time they could be together, they can be doing that extracurricular work. On the whole, I like that you've said that. The needs are being met, whereas you may come to a school here and again, if you're looking at a pie chart, it's a completely different colour, and the 90% haven't got their emotional needs met, so already you're playing catch up, and you're trying to give them that while crossing the hoops and while taking them through, this is what you need to know to get these grades, and that's not what they need at all right now. They need that building of a character and what you want to do first before it's get these results to get through these hoops. Is that a feeling you have?
Yes.
Keep going down the path. Tell me what you're feeling, because you're making me discover lots of things today.
I think you're completely right. Teachers always have targets in mind, whether or not that's personal targets or professional ones, and I think it's about all of them have to have children's well-being and progress in mind. All of them must have the child as the center focus, because otherwise why are we doing this? All of the decisions that we must make when it comes to academia and when it comes to school policy and when it comes to behavioural policy must have the child at the forefront of the decision, because otherwise why are we doing this? If a school is successful because it's based on it ticks all of the boxes, but all of those boxes, are they children in terms of what they need? You teach in schools, and some compared to my secondary school that I went to, all of, on the whole, emotional needs were being met, resources were being given to them before they got to the school. And then you go and teach in another school and they haven't been given breakfast that day and they won't get dinner. They haven't, they've just come from a household that was domestically abusive. They are fearful that their mum might, not be there when they get back because she's gone out to do something. And they come from broken homes, and they come from trauma, and they come from, you know, a dad that tells them that they're stupid. When you have those sorts of children in your care, you have to be a completely different teacher than the teachers that taught me.
Yeah, I completely agree. And unfortunately, what the system is deployed as and what the system wants and values is on front of the gate. Our students get here 96% C, B and A. Imagine if that in front said 96% of our children here say they're happy coming into school, and that's what we all valued. Everyone in that growing factory values in their building that they're on a happy premise, that they're living in a happy way. But what we all compete with is the grades they put on the front, and that's quite showing to what the system values. So it should, you know, if an Eccles born, they had that banner on the front where it was, you know, we get A's, B's and C's. That's fine, because that's what they are looking for in that area. Because also another banner could be their needs are met in that direction.
Yeah, we don't have to provide everything else because, you know, that's being provided for them elsewhere.
Yeah, there you go. And I think what my school really needed wasn't the emphasis on, and it became a battle. It became a huge, the students were screaming at them saying, we don't want this. And these are saying, you need this. And that was the emphasis on the curriculum and learning and education. And actually what they were saying was, we need love. A lot of the time, I have conversations with loads of my friends now, and we just laugh at how it was deployed. But I'm not going to say there weren't some good teachers in there, but I do have a moment of the one teacher I remember who I had was there for 3 weeks, and then he got kicked out because he didn't teach in that way they wanted it to be.
What was he like? What did he do for you?
He was in English,
Right.
and I was kicked out all my English classes because, first of all, being told you're dyslexic, you're stupid, you can't, and always comparing myself to, you've heard the story, my sister.
Yeah.
English was the one she really excelled in.
Yeah.
English the one I was stupid in. So if you put me in an English class and it was that authoritarian teacher, I just absolutely threw everything out. If you right, read this. I'm not reading that. Throw it away. Just didn't turn up. So they put me in the bottom set.
Yeah.
And again, we had a militant teacher, a really strong ex-Marine.
Right.
Scary. No way I'm going there. But he packed in at some stage.
Right.
And I thought, I'll go and give this other teacher a little whirl.
Okay.
Mr. Griffiths.
Right.
Went in, first session. What's the book where he's killing homeless people?
American Psycho.
No, but that sounds cool.
Have you never seen
that film?
the film? It's
Does
what's his name? Christian. What's his name? The one that is like a proper method actor.
It's a really interesting, and again, it's this thought on good and bad being conjured in your head because he's killing people, but he feels he's cleansing. And
I'm
it's
going to say that's American Psycho.
absolutely fascinating.
Okay.
I think it was called Slither or something like this, and maybe not a
Right.
very known book. But we get into the class. There's all boys, 8 of us.
Right.
We're all sitting there, and he picks up this book and he just starts screaming and getting into action. And already he's like become a character.
Oh, right. Okay.
And we're all so, hang on, what's happening here?
Yeah.
And he just did an hour of a full, acted out this whole book. And we didn't speak. We didn't have a chance to have
were like-
anything. We just stared at him
Like
the whole way.
spellbound, yeah.
He'd be on his knees. He'd be screaming. Teachers would be coming in. Are we all right in here? What's
Yeah.
going on? And
Just teaching.
And he wouldn't break character. He's just
Yeah.
going in.
Yeah.
And that was it. We were hooked. And then we went back in, and he would play Eric Clapton
Right.
and explain the lyrics to us.
Right.
And honestly, this man changed my life in them 3 weeks. Was such a huge figure. 3 weeks later, where's Mr. Griffiths? Oh yeah, he doesn't work here anymore. Why? And just massive arguments, and that really put me off English then.
Yeah.
And as a kid, just thinking, this is so unfair. This is really unjust.
Yeah, that one figure that you connected with, and then they said that wasn't, what was supposed to be. Yeah,
I feel, yeah, he was. We had a new changing of head,
right.
And she was really militant,
right.
And a lot of. We were in that strange year where it was all sort of good versus bad,
mm-hmm.
and a lot of the teachers that ended up sort of breaking character and even talking to the students saying, this is dark, this is wrong. So I do feel we were in a very confused environment, even as kids. But yeah, he was the big one for me. And again, them wholesome aspects and elements of his nature. He'd talk to you as a human. He'd give you this genuine love and connection and say, you're really interesting. You've got a story. Why don't you use language to bring that story out? I thought, no. And again, it just took till much later down the line. But he's a very overlooked figure in my story. I need to maybe concentrate on him a little bit more and think about what he did give to me, because in that time of absolute need and desperation, there may have been a little element of him around where it's like, oh.
There was that spark, like school actually could be for you if that was what they provided.
What school was.
Yeah. And I hope that, I just feel like those teachers that really made it for me were the charismatic ones. Like, they were the ones that made their subject interesting. They were the ones who had personality and who you could tell loved being there. And they were the teachers that you wanted to turn up for.
They'd do the extra bit, wouldn't they?
Yeah. And they showed that they cared about you, but in an authentic way, not just like, I really care, like I promise, like, but they showed you with their actions, and they took the time when it was difficult. Something that I always tell my kids is that if they want to come and give me an essay that they've written in the preparation for their GCSEs, I will sit with you one-on-one, and that's, I end up having not much of a, an afternoon, like after I finish teaching, but it means that kid feels like they are getting that extra attention if they're willing to put in the work themselves. And you can see them wanting to go the extra mile because you're showing them that you want to go the extra mile too. Yeah. And it's worth doing.
Well, one thing I'd like to speak on this podcast, and I'm just going to take it over here a little.
Go on.
You're someone, as I was listening, and we approached the death of your mum, you were very strong in who you were, of telling that story, and you took it and you spoke about it in a delicate but powerful way. And I think a lot of things that, particularly students as well, but many people just deal with struggling with how to process grief. Did you get equipped with that? Who taught you along the way? What mentors give you dealings with grief?
Phoebe Gilbert.
Oh, okay. I knew she'd get brought up.
Yeah, Phoebe Gilbert, her wonderful dad Ian Gilbert, and the book that they wrote, the little book of bereavement for schools. Weirdly enough, I don't know if she's told you this story actually. I think she mentioned it on the podcast very briefly, but she was just like, I met her in an airport, in Manchester Airport, completely by accident, which means that I just feel like we were supposed to meet at some point. We were supposed to be brought together at some point. Just like we didn't know where Terminal 2 was, and we were in this lift, and we were just like, do we get out here? I don't know. And I just saw this kind of like blonde girl who was very like pretty, and I was just like, she's got a nice outfit on. I just remember seeing her, and I was just like, she's getting out and getting in, and she just turned to me and she was just like, do you know where Terminal 2 is? And I was just like, I've no idea. Like so we were on the same flight, it turns out. And then because we were really early for the flight, we had like a Starbucks like coffee together, and she kept mentioning her dad and she didn't mention her mum. And so I like my like own experience, I was just like, something's happened to the mum, I know that. And I was just like, I think I went out and said it, and I was just like, have you lost your mum? And she was just like, yeah, I have. And I was just like, I have too. And so we sort of like, bonded in like such a strange way. And I feel like all of like the people sat in Starbucks at that time would have been just like, what on earth is going on? There's like a trauma bond that's going on here.
Trauma bond.
But when she And her dad, she's just so, we were talking about this earlier, in terms of like the literacy of her emotions. She's like the most emotionally intuitive person that I've ever met, the most empathic, but also the most like, just she is able to articulate her feelings. She's able to understand why she feels the way that she does in terms of the loss of her mum and the trauma that she experienced. And I feel like I've learned so much from her about myself, but also about, you know, how to approach certain students who were like her when she was, because she lost her mum when she was 9. I can't relate to that traumatic childhood in a lot of my students because I never had that. I can relate to them empathetically in terms of I understand some of the emotions that they do, but I can't literally like put myself in those shoes because I didn't have that.
Imagine the gravitas of what it means at that age.
And so really talking to her and knowing what she went through and her being able to articulate that so eloquently, I would say has been really the most profound kind of individual in my life when it comes to kind of grief and the understanding of such.
You two need to do a podcast together. You need to do
like
a podcast
the death
in some
or
way.
grief podcast.
You've named it already.
Yeah, we should.
Would you be interested in doing podcast? You're really good at
it. Well, thank you very much. I feel like it's, you know, I'm a teacher, so first and foremost, that's my career. And there's, you know, only some things that you can talk about when it comes to, because you are a public face, you're in a public service. So you have to be careful about what you say, because you are a public servant. You can't be personal. So perhaps a podcast wouldn't be the best thing for me. But in terms of what I can bring from my experiences, that is certainly something that I bring to who I am as a teacher in terms of the vocation that I've chosen.
I need to get Phoebe back on here.
Yeah,
definitely.
You do. Yeah, I'll come on with her.
I can remember that podcast, and I edit all these back, and you learn a lot from editing back. I spoke a lot, but I've got to give myself credit because the day before, I don't know if it was on the actual day, I'd come back from having ACL surgery.
Oh, yeah.
So I was high as a kite.
Oh, bless you.
I had to have my leg like straight there.
Yeah.
I had my crutches with me.
Yeah.
Hopped in. I think it was the day that I got back. I'd remembered I'd booked Phoebe in.
Yeah.
But it's because I'd had to wait 4 years to have the surgery after doing my knee in. But then they surprised me. So it was near my birthday. Me and Chrissy had planned to go away to a lovely Airbnb.
Nice.
And 2 days before, the hospital called me up and said, "Oh, we've had a cancellation. Do you want to have surgery?" On the day after coming back? And I thought, oh my God, I need it done. So had it, but literally the month after that, all the things were booked in, which was podcast. It was in the summertime. So we were doing events and you just see me like hopping through, dragging pallets. It was not an easy time, but literally from coming out of hospital, sitting down, sweating all over, and then leg over here. I was probably in quite a panic state too, so I was just like, right,
you didn't seem it when I listened to that.
I was going to ask you, what do you think to it? Was
I
it all
loved
right?
it. Yeah, no, I thought it was good, and I thought that, you know, she was promoting like her Cutchy Care at the time, which was for bereaved children or people who have suffered loss or are feeling isolated. And I just thought that it was such a lovely interview, especially to kind of hear her take and her incredibly informed perspective when it comes to loss and grief. Yeah.
Do you think if we had a three-way, Mikey, if we had us three together for a podcast, do you think
I think it would be lovely. Yeah.
A bit of teaching, a bit about grief. Where else could we go?
And of course, she works for Nudge now. So
she's coming down here with one of the main guys of Nudge,
fantastic.
I think. Yeah,
that would be amazing. She works for Nudge now. So the idea that she's actually working not in education directly, but working with students inside the education system on their educational experience, I think that would be interesting.
Oh, mate, I'm buzzing for it. Do you know we're nearly 2 hours in?
Are we?
That's crazy, isn't it?
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah, don't look at that.
I have no idea what that is. Yeah.
I'm loved this whole journey. Do you think there's much for teachers going into education now, NQTs, that you could just give a little bit of everything we spoke about there, bit of advice?
Things come slowly. You can't change everything at once. You've got to put the effort in, but also be very patient in terms of what you can change at any one time. Things take literally years to, build in terms of school policy and seeing a difference. Not that you can't make a difference on an individual level, of course you can, but to see kind of real structural change takes ages. But to not give up and certainly be patient, but also be that keen. They're called ECTs now, so early careers teachers rather than NQTs. So to teach, I'd say be that keen ECT, be the person that gets noticed for going the extra mile, having that passion, but also having that understanding and realistic approach when it comes to education, but never lose that belief and that vision, but find ways to navigate around the structural policies in place when trying to bring about those visions, I'd say.
Was that patience within you from the start, or did you have times where you were getting rocky quite quickly and thinking, is this for me, when things happened and occurred? Have you got any moments where you did have to have reflective, have I led a lie? Do I want to be a teacher? Have you had them moments?
I've never not wanted to be a teacher. I've always loved it, and I've always known that it was the thing for me. I've never lost that. I think as I've gotten older, I think I've just become more patient in terms of what I know I can achieve, and that it takes longer than, as teachers, we want to fix everything, and we want to, we've got the idea, we want to run with it. We want to do this, this and this because we've got the idea. And I feel like I've kind of taken the time to understand that things take a long time in order to achieve, and to be more patient in achieving those goals. And that's okay for it to take a long time. Things take a long time for a reason, because you've got to work it out in terms of how is that going to look? How is that going to benefit that child? How is that going to benefit that group of children, that year group? Because we have to get it right, but we have to get it right first time as well. And I think really organising the workshop that I did for you was really kind of what made me understand what goes into organising a process like that, in terms of, communicating with the guest, getting the letters out to parents, communicating with teachers to say that those students are going to be absent from the lesson, figuring out, it seems like really simple stuff, but when is which year group going to be in for which hour of the day was the thing that we went back and forth on most, in terms of what makes the most sense for them at that time. And although that is so much of the minutiae, all of those things make a huge difference on the day. And I think that event really kind of taught me how to organise something for a school. I think such good experience, and it was an amazing day. It was a magical day, and I use that word seriously. But I've learned so much from it in terms of going forward, being a teacher and being a leader within a school. I think in that regard, that was just an amazing experience, I'd say.
Well, thank you so much for that. And the magic was a double act.
It was.
Honestly was. I've never had that amount of minutiae with going into a day. But that made me feel so comfortable, confident and ready for it, that I actually got to stand there and do what I know I can do well on telling stories or being a performer and then connecting. I just got to do that solely, and that was massively down to you, so I really do appreciate that.
Thank you. And you made such a difference to so many of those students on that day, and we can remember the standouts, but for them, we know, and we've talked about it as members of staff, what impact that has had on those students that stood up and performed the poem, and that they would have never have had those experiences if you hadn't have come in, or nobody would have shown them that they could have the confidence to do that, and it meant so much to them. And they haven't stopped asking about it. And they haven't like stopped saying, you know, I had one of my year 7s the other day, and he, you know, even that was like one of the crazier sessions. Like it just goes to show like how, you know, even though that was the more chaotic, you still left such a huge impact. And he was just like, when's that like Mike, like rhythmical Mike coming in again? Can I come again? Like when he comes in another time? And like one of the year 7s who struggles with like social anxiety and confidence issues, 2 weeks after you came in for the first time, he never volunteers any answers ever because he's like worried that he's going to get it wrong. He had written a poem and he put his hand up to read it.
No way.
And I'm gonna
like, dude.
And
you get.
and I went home and like sobbed about it because for him, he always doubts himself. He still does. Like it's, you know, that's not cured him. But I've never been so like solely shocked to see his hand raise. Like when I was just like, does anybody else want to share theirs? And he put it, and he's like on the front row of the class, and he put his hand up, and I was just like, I wouldn't say his name, but I was just like, you know, do you want to share? And he was just like, and he just read it out, like no, like didn't miss a beat, didn't like, you know, like take a breath even. And I just said like, I'm so proud of you for sharing that. Thank you so much for letting me hear that. And I found his brother afterwards. I was just like, guess what? Like, you know, he's volunteered to read something out, and he was just like, and his brother was just like, what? And I was just like, tell your mum. But even in that session, as kind of crazy as it was, that kid who isn't a behavioural challenge at all, he's just very kind of socially anxious, he has taken that and now volunteered to read a poem. He's very bright, but he just doesn't believe in himself. And for him to do that, that was like a standout for me in terms of like a teacher's career. And even though like it wouldn't, you know, there's lots of those that I have, I was just like, that kid has done something that even though I believe everything's possible, I didn't believe that was possible, particularly for him at that time. And wow. Going forward, I just think you're humbled so often in terms of these children achieve the unexpected all of the time, and that's every day, and that's why being a teacher is so amazing.
Oh, mate, we're an emotional roller coaster over here. After going for that development course, I've been told, no, Mike, you need to feel your emotions, allow crying, allow extreme laughter, feel. But I'm like, I'm trying to conduct a podcast here, so my head's going, you're supposed to, it's okay to cry, but my other side's like, come on, Mike, you've got to get through this.
Empathy's a sign of strength, isn't it? And I feel like it's so important that it doesn't get confused for weakness. It's it's reflective, it's introspective, and it's a sign of strength at the end of the day.
So if it was just me and you chatting here without all this around, I would have been going right now. Yeah. But I've just stood there and gone, come on, Mikey, do that thing. Yeah. It goes up through here. But thank you so much for sharing everything you've shared with me today. And I love who you are as a human. I'm so happy I've met you. And anytime I feel that, why do I do this teaching thing? Or why am I going into there? What's this about? You're the first person I'm going to come running to and go, can you just remind me that thing again?
I don't know everything, trust me. I'm only like a third year qualified teacher, but you know, I know some things, and there's always stuff that I want to learn and work out as well, but I'm always happy to collaborate on anything and impart any information and wisdom or advice that I have.
Just another thought is, you know, you're so enthusiastic and passionate of teaching. Yeah. For me, when I've got a thing like poetry, I love poetry. I've in the past ended up just consuming my whole soul, psyche, DNA around poetry, and that's maybe where it diminishes for me a little bit. I'm only going from my perspective and experience here. Do you have a similar thing? Do you like to sort of mix it up with other passions? I know you've got your singing and so on. Have you repressed them a little bit, or do they shine through?
I never really get to sing anymore. apart from like I like my local pub does like an open mic night on a Sunday, and you know they think I'm Beyonce in there because you know it's you know where I live there's nothing that really goes on in there, so that's quite nice from like an ego perspective. But like music was always an outlet for me. I always loved singing, I always loved performing, I always loved music, lyrics, particularly even though like I'm, you know, white, middle class. I loved rap, I loved hip hop, I loved R&B.
For everyone.
Yeah.
Poetry.
It is, yes, rhythm and poetry. And I remember just even when I was like 9 or 10, my nan took me to like the Ripley Morrisons, and there was like albums in there. And she was just like, do you want like the Britney album or the Christina album? I love Britney and Christina, but I was just like, no, I want this like R&B hip hop compilation album. And I remember picking it up and like seeing the artist on there, and I was just like, no, I want that one. Because like there was like Shiesty in there, and there was like I don't know, Lil Mama at the time. I know it's not very good at the time, but like Lil Kim, sorry. And I can't remember now, like all of the artists like Neo and Kanye West, and I was just like, I want all of those. Yeah, don't get me started. But in terms of those artists and those stories and their lyrics that they wrote about in terms of their experiences that I couldn't empathize with, in terms of I never had that. I always had this weird connection with that art form and that genre of music. That was always for me.
It sort of makes sense why you love English so much, because if you're looking at music, what gives you the most amount of diction in one space? Rap. How many words and syllables and playful metaphors and like it's
and like
all
the goosebumps that you get, yeah, like the flows. Like I know that you would message me about the Kanye documentary as well. Just seeing him in his form before like anybody really knew who he was, and him being in the studio with who were at that time his idols, Jay-Z, Mos Def, Nas, Pharrell, and playing them what we now know to be classics like Jesus Walks, Through the Wire, Breathe In, Breathe Out with Ludacris, and him showing them to his idols and being just like, what do you think to this? And having him deliver the lyrics on, you know, his guest spots on Jay-Z tracks. That for me, I've always felt like, massive tangent, I've always felt like with Kanye West in particular, I've always felt like I had this like weird connection with him. And kind of watching that documentary made me realise why, like he had like that mother, his mother was very similar to mine in terms of she told him that he was, you know, could achieve anything. The way that she interacted with him was just so beautiful, by like saying like when he came off stage, I think it was like an MTV performance he'd given, and she was just like walking with him, and he like became like a child, even though he was like in his 20s at the time, must have been. And she was just like, that was fantastic, Kanye. She was just like, you went up there and you were talking about being self-conscious. I have no idea what I'm doing in college. She was just like reciting his lyrics back to him, and he was so like gentle in that moment, even though that's so different from what we understand Kanye to be really nowadays. And just the way that he had that, because of his mum, unbreakable sense of self-belief, even though they tried to box him, even though they tried to push back his release date, even though they said that, you know, you're never going to make it as a rapper, you're a producer, that's all you're going to be good at. He was like, when nobody knew who he was, I am the greatest of all time, and you just need to give me the opportunity to show you. And even when they kept saying no, he kept trying to find ways around it, and like the methods that he went through, and like the extents and the extremes that he went through in order to get that album released. That's something that I feel like I've really, you know, been inspired by recently.
Have you seen him on the Poetry Death Slam?
I haven't. Oh no, I think that was one of the clips that they used in the documentary.
I bet it was, yeah. That made him one of the first sort of... no, it was a really famous night, the poetry and just reciting your lyrics. But I think that sort of spilled over into...
I think that was it. Yeah.
This guy's special.
He came on with like a polo, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he started
so
spitting like...
Yeah. But, again, that taught me how important the silences are in poetry. Because, yeah, when he's got a beat on and his track, and he's like... It's all sort of this musical part, but there was me seeing this performer completely, like you just said then, act it all out and interact with the audience and play off of every moment and every hand gesture and everything's so important. That for me that's what poetry is.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh God, I got goosebumps then. Do you know what? My best friend in the universe, Jagger, Kanye's what brought us together.
Yeah.
Because I was sat in class one day and I always just had headphones on. I was fed up with the noise. I was fed up with everyone around.
Yeah.
And Hey Mama came on. And even though Jagger's got what I saw as this really archetypal mother figure, and my mum I've grown to love and respect now, but I always saw in a really negative light.
Yeah.
He was talking so positively about his mum, and it was everything I wanted in a mum as I was listening, and it just hit me from every direction. I was going, oh my God, this man loves his mum so much. Na 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 na, hey mum. And I'm like, oh God. And I put my headphones down and I shouted in the class because I didn't have any friends really, but I just shouted, does anybody know the song Kanye West, Hey Mama? and my mate Jagger just pointed at me and went, dude, that's my favourite song.
Aww.
And then we went and just sat together and spoke for hours. And that was our moment. We just had the Hey Mama moment. And we've travelled to Australia together. We've been all over the world. I've connected. And it was Kanye West that brought us together.
He's an artist that will do that to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's so real, so authentic, so honest. And when it connects with you the way it made you feel, and it made somebody else feel that connection, that's where it binds you.
What a guy.
What a podcast.
Yeah.
We've smashed it.
And my first one as well.
Is this your first?
Yeah. I'm normally in a classroom.
I mean,
like...
I've got lives to live, and I know you have too, but we could be doing another hour or two here, couldn't we?
Yeah, definitely. And, I'd love to come on again if you'll have me. I'd love to have you into the school again. There's more kids, Key Stage 4 that I'd love you to work with that would, really resonate with your story personally. See if we can get that to fruition again.
I'm ready.
Yeah.
I'm ready. And this is just, again, give me that moment I needed where it felt, just get me back into a school. I'm
so glad that we did that. Yeah.
Anybody that's listened to this point, probably me nan, nan.
Yeah.
But thinking about teaching and going into school, if they've really been inspired by you, how could they get in touch with you?
In touch with me, I have an email address. I won't give it out just now, only because I don't want, the students get it.
Yeah.
But in terms of any point of contact, I can give those out. Yeah, go through you, okay. Mike. Yeah.
Because most people say their Twitter handles.
I'm not a public face.
Of course. Most people say that at the end. But if you are inspired by this, they can come through the Old Farm bus.
Yeah.
How can I speak to her? And then I can put them in touch.
I can certainly advise them privately in terms of how to get into teaching, advice. And, I certainly don't know everything. I'm in year 3 of qualified teaching. So in terms of any advice that I can impart, wisdom, just how to get into this profession and just how amazing it is. I can talk all day about how amazing it is. Because I'd be more than happy to do that.
Honestly, listening to this, and if I was somebody that really wanted to be a teacher, I'd be finding out how to get in touch with you somehow.
Yeah.
So that's really helpful. I really appreciate it. I'll do this bit. Guys, you've been a part of the Old Farm Bus, Back of the Bus Sessions podcast. I'm going to leave you on this, and I always will. Just be nice to one another, you beautiful set of buggers. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.